That means that any of North Carolina's state tests, so things like North Carolina check-ins, EOGs, EOCs, anything that is a math test put out by the state, that one kind of falls under my purview. The focus of our webinar today will be to help to familiarize teachers with the embedded calculator that we use for our NC check-ins and end of grade testing. A little bit of housekeeping as we start today. First of all, welcome. We know your days are long this time of year, and we are incredibly grateful that you are choosing to give us some of your afternoon. We have defaulted everyone to mute. This webinar is capped at 1,000, and we currently have 1,000 folks. So we know that not everyone was able to get in, and for that reason, we are recording today's webinar. The webinar will be sent out to anyone who registered via email tomorrow, and that email will be something that you can share with those that you work with. So anyone who registered, whether they attend today or not, will receive a link tomorrow in their email, and that link will have the full recording. It will have the screen captures included. It will also have the link to the materials that today's presenter will be sharing with you. We will also be posting that recording to our DPI website, and it will also come out on our TNN listserv. So that's Testing News Network. That's how we originally got out the information that we were having these webinars. So that same platform will be used to share the recording once all of the recordings are done. For those of you who teach 8th grade, next Wednesday, same time, same place, we'll be doing a similar webinar for the graphing calculator, and that one is geared for teachers of 8th grade math and high school courses. I am going to put these links in the chat here in just a few moments. Today's featured calculator can be found at this bit.ly site. So this is the direct link to the Desmos calculator that we use for North Carolina testing. Dave is going to talk to you a little bit later today about how there is kind of a generic Desmos calculator, a scientific calculator. But North Carolina, we have enabled and disabled a few things for testing purposes. So if you're wanting to really prepare your kids for what they're going to see come test day, you're going to want to use this bit.ly link that I will share with you. The link to today's agenda, the slides, everything that Dave's going to be going over with you. He has created a folder of resources that he has curated for you all. All of that information can be found at that second bit.ly link. And again, in a moment, I'm going to drop that in the chat so that if you're on a computer and you want to follow along, you can. Due to the size of the webinar, a few kind of tips and tricks to help me facilitate. If you will use the Q&A feature, if you have questions for the presenter or the host. So, if you have a question about something that, can the calculator do this or not do this, or how does this work? If you'll put those items in the Q&A, that will allow me to kind of keep track of those questions and keep them separate maybe from technical questions. We will be stopping periodically to address questions. So what I'll do is, as Dave is talking with you all, I will go through and kind of come across those questions that are being asked frequently, and Dave will address those with you guys verbally. Anything that's, kind of a quick answer. So maybe you need, the links again to access the training materials, or you need the link to the calculator, or you have a question that maybe the whole group doesn't need to hear, but you still have that question. If you will drop that in the Q&A, I will kind of field through, and some of those will be addressed verbally, and then those that I can, I'm going to try my best to get a response back to you in Q&A. As I said, we do have 1,000 folks on here, so if for some reason I don't get you, you are welcome. Before we leave, I'll make sure you have my email. You can always follow up with an email. Chat. So the chat feature, that's what I will be using to share the resources, the two bit.lys. And when Dave shares some things later that everyone who's on a computer that might like to follow along, I'll make sure I drop those in the chat. So we'll kind of use the chat for kind of general announcements that for folks who might want to follow along. If you're having technical difficulties, in the box here for chat, if you will choose to send it to the host, I will do my best to try to get back with you. I know that last week we did a similar webinar for elementary schools, and some folks did better on a computer than on a mobile device. Some folks said that on a mobile device, they downloaded the app and it worked a lot better for them. And also know that in the email where you received your confirmation for today, there is a way that you can call in and get the audio that way, if that works better for you. So I'm gonna go back one quick second and just remind you that, again, today's webinar will be recorded. We'll be sending out the recording that you'll be able to share with others. I'm going to drop these 2 links in the chat for you in just a moment. Today, we are fortunate to have Dave Sable with us. Dave is a Desmos certified presenter. He teaches up north, and he is a pro at this. And at this time, I am going to turn it over to Dave for him to share his expertise with you.
All right. Thank you so much, Beth. All right. It's coming over. Here we go. All right. Let's make sure I can share my screen here. All right. Perfect. And there we go. All right. Thank you so much all for having me. I had a great, if you were part of this similar training last year, I had a chance to speak with many of you last year as well, and with a lot of the younger grades teachers last week. And I love talking to people from all over the country about this tool and the ways that it might help enrich your math courses. My name is Dave Sable. I am a math teacher. I'm a full-time math teacher currently. I teach high school math at St. Ignatius High School in Cleveland, Ohio, up north, as Beth said. And then my school day just ended, just like many of yours probably just ended. So we can kind of sit back. I'll do most of the work for you, and we can have a good chat about this tool. So let's just dip a little bit into, well, first off, and Beth did a great job of explaining everything and where to find everything. This is that document that is at bit.ly/NC4function, all lowercase. It's also in the lower right-hand corner of a lot of the slides I'll be showing you in the first few minutes here. And what is not the learning goal here? This is, we only have less than an hour together here this afternoon. And unfortunately, we're not going to be, developing some sort of a theoretical knowledge of teaching and technology. Desmos does do a lot of that work. And we could talk about that if we had a few days to chat about that in a course. But that is not what this is, for better or for worse, because this is kind of where we are right now, right? This is this school year. And a lot of us really need some tools to help us get through not just the normal things that we have to work with at the beginning of the school year, but the things the unique challenges we have at this very particular unique school year. And this tool, Desmos as a whole, I think is very valuable in normal times. And I think that there's a lot of elements of it that you might find useful in these days as well. So again, the learning goal also is to not develop expertise in new teaching and technology. What you're going to find is that this webinar is not going to be so much about showing you exactly how to do everything. It's more about showing you what is possible with this tool. And you're going to find that on this document that I've shared with you, there are a lot of resources and directions that you can go in to extend your learning about the calculator or about the activities that we'll be talking about later. So our hope is really that you're kind of just sticking your foot into the waters of this new school year with this tool, and kind of seeing how Desmos might be able to help you in distance teaching and in potentially other scenarios that you might find yourself in. Right? I mean, teaching today looks kind of like this, and this was kind of relevant, very especially last semester or last spring, where have the idea and then it kind of morphs, and then you're told to change it again, and you're told new circumstances, new constraints. By the time you get to the actual teaching, it does not look quite like what we had planned on. But our second goal today is to understand how you can develop these tools and ideas throughout the year. So I will be leaving you with lots of resources that you can take to extend your learning in whatever direction you need to take it in, and starting at whatever level is comfortable for you. Our agenda today is basically right here in terms of the nuts and bolts of what we're going to talk about. We are going to talk about the scientific calculator and specifically how it applies to the North Carolina test and how you can look at it on the North Carolina test. We're also going to be talking about how you can teach, use Desmos as a teaching tool. Hopefully, if we have time, we should be able to get to the beginnings of how you can build your own activities with Desmos. And I want to make sure that we do leave ample time for Q&A, which is why if we need to shortcut 3 for 4, we will do it. And please continue to give me feedback as we go. We all right? Okay, just want to make sure. Okay, so let's dive right into the scientific calculator. I'm going to go ahead and open up a new tab on my browser and show you where we can start here. So I'm just going to go ahead and start with Desmos.com. And you can see right here on the front page of Desmos.com, there's a lot of places you could go to. The main tool that we're sort of drawing you towards is the graphing calculator. And that is something that we are going to be talking about in depth a week from today. And I know if you're grade 8, this is the calculator that's relevant for your test. So we're not really going to talk about it much today because we invite you to try to come back next week if you want to find out more about it. But what we are going to talk about today is the scientific calculator. Up here in this list of math tools, you can see the scientific calculator right here. We also see the 4-function calculator we talked about with the younger grades teachers last week. And we even have some cool things like a matrix calculator and a geometry tool. But we're going to hit the scientific calculator right here, right now. Beth mentioned that the North Carolina calculator version of this calculator is slightly different. Now, at the risk of being confusing, I hope I'm not. I'm going to demo everything on this particular one. I'm also going to show you exactly where you can find that North Carolina calculator on here, and I'll be very clear about what is different. To be totally honest with you, from what I will demo for you, there will be 0 differences between what you're seeing here and the actual North Carolina version of it. I'll tell you what those differences are, but I'm not really even going to get into them. So everything I'm showing you can definitely be done on the North Carolina version of this calculator, okay? But this is basically it. And, you know, it's arranged as you might imagine a calculator would be arranged. We can use the buttons right here on screen to perform operations. The answers are going to show up right there on the right-hand side. If I hit enter, it's going to create a new row where I can try a new operation. I can, let me see here. 7 divided by 2. The way this calculator works, it's going to treat all division as a fraction bar operation situation. The 4-function calculator uses that old-fashioned division symbol right on the screen, but this is going to display everything that uses division as a fraction. Also, any number that comes up that is not an integer, that is still a rational number, is going to give me the option to convert it to a fraction, an improper fraction. It will not convert to mixed numbers. We can input mixed numbers. For example, if I wanted to input, let's say 3.5, the way that I could best do that is to type in 3. I'm going to hit my space bar, and then I'm going to hit 1/2 there, and that will operate as a mixed number. Oops, I'm going to delete that. I got to use my arrow to get out of that, or I can just click the cursor there. I'm going to hit +6. And there you go. Okay. Speaking of the keyboard, everything that I'm doing can also be done on the keyboard, where the slash next to shift is going to be my division sign. I can use arrows to move the cursor around, and I can use parentheses and all the other characters that I see on the screen as well. Okay. I can also go back up, and I can change any individual value in any previous operation, and that's going to change that total on the fly. We have a few other functions down below too that you can see. We have the square root button, of course, that can evaluate integer values, but also can evaluate any sort of irrational value up to a certain point. I also have the ability to do absolute value operations here. And I also have percent of available right here on the screen. 9% of 55. 4 happens to be about 4.68, or in fraction form, 243 over 50. So what else can I show you on here? Something else that I think is kind of neat about this calculator is that I can also use constants and use them to input formulas. So for example, if I input A equals 9, if I try B equals 12, and then I can say the square root of A squared. I'm typing in A, but I also can find it from this menu right here, plus B squared. I'm using the caret button above the 6 for my exponents on my computer, on my keyboard, and that'll show me that nice Pythagorean triple. I can go back up here and change these if I wanted in that way. So that's also kind of nice that it would update that on the fly. In terms of some other options here, if I want to delete any one element, this button right here will delete one space back. It's kind of moving the cursor back with us. I can also use it to clear a whole row, and then I hit one more time and I can clear the whole screen. If I hit undo, it'll undo back one motion as far back as I want. There's those other elements that I undid before. Also note down here, I have this nice wrench, and all of this can be put into what we call projector mode, where everything is just nice and big. This is what I would often use if I am using this as a demo calculator on a smartboard in the front of a classroom. And depending, if you're showing this as a calculator to do calculations over a video conference, for example, this might be a good tool to use to make everything nice and big. If you have students with visual impairments, we also support different Braille formats and reverse contrast, which depending on your eye needs might be necessary, and you might just prefer this anyways. So I'll turn that projector mode off for now. We also offer a lot of other functions over here in the function menu, some of which you might need and some of which you might not. But those are what we have there. Okay, I think I showed you everything I wanted to show you there. Let me back out just a little bit, and we'll take some questions in a minute or two. But before we do that, I am just going to show you exactly where you can find the North Carolina calculator. That bit.ly link that Beth shared with you will take you directly there. But just in case you forget what it is, let me show you how you can find it from the Desmos main page. So I'm right back here to desmos.com. Math Tools is where we originally found the scientific calculator. But we want to go to the section called Assessments. You can find that right here in Resources. And this is going to take me to a page that is specifically for states that use Desmos on their state testing. You can see every state that is in darker blue is a state that uses Desmos on their end of course exam. If I click on North Carolina, I'll see a few links in this PDF right here. This PDF does a good job of giving us all the details about the test relative to the Desmos calculator. And what you're going to find down here is the details on exactly what does and doesn't work on the scientific calculator. Okay. One thing that I did not show you at all that is disabled is defining functions. So with the general calculator, you're allowed to say in a line f of x equals, say, 2x minus 1. And then I can, on the next row, type in something like f of 1, and it would evaluate that function for whatever function value I have. That does not work on the North Carolina calculator. Another thing that is different, that you did see very briefly, is there's the tab where you can type in any letter. Perhaps if you were typing in constants or trying to spell something else out. On the standard Desmos calculator, that's the normal QWERTY keyboard, whereas on the North Carolina calculator, they're arranged in alphabetical order instead. So students would still have access to those letters, they just would be in a different order. Okay. So we go back, and right from here, you'll see a link to the page that would go directly to the general info for the North Carolina test. But this link right here is the link that is the same as the bit.ly link that Beth shared with you earlier. So as you can see, it looks extraordinarily similar to what I just showed you. You're reminded that this is the North Carolina version with the green bar at the top. As you can see, the keyboard is laid out alphabetically instead. and everything else is really there. So otherwise, everything that we showed is available. So it's truly up to you whether or not you want to send your kids this direct version to practice with and to use in class, or if you want to access the one that is a little bit more readily available from the front page. I just want to make sure that if you or a student needs to use the calculator but doesn't quite remember that link or doesn't have the link handy, you can always get to it from that front page of Desmos. Okay. All right, this might be a good time just to take a moment to see if there are any questions specific to the scientific calculator. Beth, do we have any popping up there?
We do. So for many of the questions, I've been able to send you private responses, and I do believe I have cleared out the Q&A, with the exception of the handful that Dave is going to help us with right now. Dave, do you know anything about single source logins and Desmos being available through Clever?
I don't. And now here's what I'll say. I mean, specific to what I've shown you so far, you certainly don't need to log in to access the scientific calculator. And accessing the other activities that I'll show you later, I know that they are compatible with Google logins. So if you're a Google school and your school uses Google to manage different elements of their LMS or other logins, any Google login will work on Desmos. I think that is the only current single login that we have available. In terms of embedding things like the scientific calculator into Clever, we do not offer that at this time that I'm aware of.
Okay. Next question. We have several questions all kind of hinging about the fraction to decimal conversion. Can you demo that again?
Sure.
And then part 2 would be, can you show how to enter a mixed number, particularly if kids are using a device that doesn't have a space bar?
Right. Thank you for reminding me about that. Absolutely. So just really quick, let me throw a decimal out there while we're here. 2.7, for example, plus, let's say 1.9. Great. So that gives me 4.6. Oh, actually, hang on a second. Oh, this is something I'm not expecting. Beth, do you see what I'm seeing here? It's not giving me the option to, on the North Carolina version, it's not giving me the option to convert, but it should be, right?
It should. Can you maybe try the Desmos Scientific, and I can always follow up with the programmers about that?
Definitely, yeah. I mean, that's exactly what I was going to say. This seems like something that they just haven't switched over for this calculator, which is, I'm glad that we caught it. But I'm happy to show it to you because I know that it will work the way that we anticipate it will on the North Carolina version. So we will definitely make sure that that is good. So let's go back to a similar example that we're just saying. Let's say 2.7 plus, say, something like 1.9. And so anything that is a raw number will give me this option to convert back and forth. And it'll just toggle back and forth between the improper fraction, the simplified improper fraction, and the decimal version of it. Okay. And that'll work back and forth no matter which sort of side I start that out. Furthermore, if I wanted to input a mixed number, again, the first way I show that to you is to type in 6, hit the space on the space bar, and then, the fraction end of it after that. Now, it is the case that if you have students working on a tablet, unfortunately, the keyboard on here doesn't have that space option available, but there is a way to make sure that we get it done. And the way to do that is to start with that fraction end of it, and then throw that cursor to the beginning. And you can use that by clicking right in front. You can also do that using these arrows. And with that cursor in the front, I can put the integer portion of the mixed number in front. And that is going to act just like this version that seems to have this extra spacing. So it's going to recognize both of them in the same way. And then again, it'll convert that to an improper fraction if that's something that you want to do.
All right, next, can you show how to toggle to have the screen kind of go to black?
Oh, sure. So any of those display options are going to be here in the wrench to adjust the settings. And again, that's where I had projector mode. Reverse contrast, I think, is what was being referenced there.
Awesome. All right, I have a few questions based on just sort of testing in North Carolina. Grade 8 is kind of, it's a little bit of an oddity. So the calculator that Dave is showing us today, this is the one that is embedded for state testing for grades 6, 7, and 8. So that's going to be North Carolina check-ins, end of grade, and end of course. Now, the way that will work is we have a secure browser called NCTest. And when students are in the calculator active portion of the test, up in the right-hand corner, there will be a little icon of a calculator. And when they open that, they're going to get the North Carolina version of the scientific calculator. And so that's going to be like a question by question. They'll have to kind of click on that icon, open it up, they can close it, they can go to the next one. Grade 8 is a little bit different. It's actually the only grade in North Carolina where students have the option of both the scientific calculator that Dave is showing you, but also the graphing calculator, which is our focus for next Wednesday. And we do still have, I think, about 80 seats left for that one for next Wednesday. Grade 8 will actually have two icons. There will be one icon for the scientific calculator we're focused on today, and there will be another icon for the graphing calculator that works for grade 8 and any of the high school math courses. This is not a separate tab. It's not a separate window. What happens when the kids are in the secure test browser is it sort of like locks everything up. So if they are on a desktop or a laptop, it's not going to let the kids click out of that window. That's how we maintain test security. However, we also do have it for Chromebooks and for iPads, and it's going to be the same thing. When you log in, it's going to say that it's going to perform a self-lock, and it's going to prevent the kids from, for example, on an iPad, pressing the home button and getting out. Once they're in that test, they're in. And that's why the Desmos functions, there'll be a little icon that they pop up. So students are still allowed to use handheld calculators, but because we are embedding this, we are kind of jumping on first thing this fall, making sure teachers are aware of what it is, how it works, what functionality it offers, particularly in this really funky year where so many of us are doing some kind of remote or hybrid learning. And so, that's one of the item agendas for later that Dave's going to talk to you about, ways that you can use this synchronously and asynchronously. Those are coming if you, we're just not there yet. He's just kind of starting with general features. We have another string of questions. Can you go back to fraction decimal conversions? Dave, can you show us the A-B button and how that works?
Sure. This, to be totally honest with you, this A-B button is going to do the exact same thing that the division button will do. We've put it there to remind, one of the ethos here with the design is that we want to make sure that, early learners, students that are new to a tool like this, that they, that it's going to work. It's going to work right the first time that they try it, and that they're not going to be repelled because something looks different from how they expect it to go. So again, sort of with the scientific calculator, the intent, the philosophy is that division is the same as a fraction, and that's why this fraction bar right here, this division is going to create a fraction bar. Now that being said, a student might say, well, how do I do fractions on here? And if they see this, they might not make that connection, and that's simply why this exists. This exists purely for students that say, well, I want to type a fraction, but I don't know how to do that otherwise. So it is going to, it's basically the exact same button as division.
All right, Dave, we have another set of questions. You are working with us today from the web version. Can you address how, if teachers or students chose to download one of the apps, how functionality might be a little bit different? And then also, I don't know that we have said this enough today, and I don't think we can say it too much. Desmos is totally free. There is no subscription. There is no download fee. This is a great equalizer in terms of getting technology in the hands of students, particularly if you've got students that you are teaching from home, which is another reason why we have talked this up so much this year, is that we know this is a great way to kind of level the playing field and give all students access to a really great calculator.
That's absolutely right. I mean, and it's a great question to be asking. So how much does this cost, or where are they making their money? I mean, to be totally honest with you, one of the reasons we make money, one of the ways we make money is through relationships with a state like North Carolina, strictly through the test, and other states and other testing agencies, and some relationships we have with the publishers. But that being said, everything I'm showing you today, and the vast majority of a lot of the tools that we have are all completely free of use for any student. So the apps, and I'm just actually looking at the app on my phone just to kind of confirm one or two things here. But the apps that you will see on the App Store, different app stores, there is an app for the scientific calculator. There's a special app for the graphing calculator. There's also a special test app itself, and it's called Desmos Test Mode. I sometimes use that in class because on a mobile device, it'll lock down the mobile device and allow them to use the calculator without any notifications coming in, without the ability to leave that app. So the apps in general are really going to work identical to how the web versions do. And for that matter, the web versions on a mobile device, like the web version on a tablet, the web version on a mobile phone, is going to be very similar to what you're going to see on the apps on those mobile devices as well. I will also mention that there is a special app called Desmos Test Mode that I just talked about that has a lockdown browser within it, or a lockdown capabilities. And it also has the ability to find the North Carolina versions of these calculators to kind of use those to practice with as well. So that's another place. And again, the only difference is going to be the function notation and the keyboard layout. But that's something else you can look into. So there's a scientific calculator app, there's the graphing calculator app, and then there's the Desmos Test Mode app. And they are otherwise going to work almost identical to what you see on the web. The main benefit there might be if you think you might be in a situation where you don't have internet connectivity, the app is always going to work. So.
And one last question, and I think we're caught up for now. Can you show cube roots and how to cube?
Absolutely. Great. Yeah, good. Very good questions. Very good questions. So we do have this button right here that is going to give us any roots that is not square roots. So if I hit that, it's going to give me the option to type in what root I want. And then I can type the radicand under there, and it's going to work great. And it'll work with any roots that I want to try to compute, right? And then any other exponent that's not square can be used with this button. So I can say maybe 6 to the 3rd power. The shortcut for that is also to type in Shift 6 for that caret button that's kind of become a worldwide notation for exponents, and that will get that exponent superscript as well.
I lied. Can you do absolute value for us? And then I'm going to let you talk for a bit.
No problem. So absolute value is located right here. So it'll give me those absolute value bars. I can type in any expression or individual value that I want, and then that's it. I can also, let's see, there's a keyboard shortcut for that if you want, and that's ABS, and then parentheses will also give me absolute value if I want to do that instead. And even one more shortcut, that little vertical character above return, if I shift there, that's another little keyboard shortcut you can use there. Although, I mean, I imagine it's right there on the front screen, so a lot of you might just want to use that one instead. So, all right. All right, well, are we good to move on, Beth?
We are good for now. Thank you.
Awesome. Cool. All right, well, like I said, I'm happy to do as many questions as we need to. And but I do want to show you a few of the other teaching tools. I have some slides here that kind of briefly hint at what we were just talking about. I do want to talk a little bit more now about teaching with Desmos. And we have, how many do we have in here? We have a good number of people in the room. I'm going to send you to an activity right now. I'm going to put up a code for an activity that I want some folks to jump into to try out. The truth is, if all of you jumped into it, it might slow us down a little bit. These tools are well built. They're optimized for classes of, up to 30, 40, 50 students, even if necessary. And it can handle 100. It can even handle about 200. But if you get above there, it starts getting a little laggy on my end. So what I'm going to ask you to do, I'm going to show you a code. And I would humbly request to only jump into this code, into this activity, if your last name begins with an M, as in Mary. I will show everyone else what's going on. I'll show everyone else what you're missing. But if we restrict it, then that'll give us a little bit more of a manageable size. So go to, if your last name begins with an M, head over to open a new tab and go to student.desmos.com and type in that little code right there. And it's going to ask you if you want to log in. You can if you want. If you have a Google login, you can use that. You do not have to log in. Essentially, if a student or a teacher or anybody is logged in when they're doing an activity like this, it just means that it's going to save their progress. It's going to save their progress so that if they want to come back to it later on, they can. And we already have some folks pouring in, which is great. I'm looking over here on a different screen. And what you're about to see right now is you're going to see what it looks like behind the scenes if I were running this activity. So first I'll jump over and I'll show you what the activity actually is. Start a new tab. And I'm going to go to the teacher side of this. Whoops, I can spell it. And I'm going to find the activity that I started, activity history. And I did a few others today before I started this one. But the one that we're working on right here is right there. And this is a dashboard that is going to show behind the scenes of all the different folks that are in here right now working. So first off, let me just show you what they're working on right now. This is the student side. So I have one slide that just simply asks kind of who are you and what grade level you're working on or what role do you have. I have this first slide that allows the people to just kind of select where their mood's at today and also maybe type in something that they're missing from their pre-COVID life. Then we have just a little brief geometric activity that is part of a larger activity we have that I thought might be fun, where we just ask you to kind of adjust this shape in any way that you like. Okay? And then the next several screens, we're going to have you play with that shape. So this is the shape that I made. And adjust the zoom level and hit print. So I can zoom in and out of this thing and then hit print. And it makes a bigger version of what I just made. I can make smaller versions instead. And then ask a question about what stays the same here and what changes between the pre-image and the post-image. Here's another version of it, but it's broken. If I print there, oh, it looks crazy. I can give some feedback on what I think is happening there. Here's another version that if I zoom but print, it gives me another sort of off version of this shape. And I can describe what's broken there. And then it gives me some options here, and it says, these two are scaled copies, these two are not. Describe how you know if something is a scaled copy. The eighth screen here is a card sort, where I can sort these pairs into scaled copies and not scaled copies. And then my last slide here is where I simply ask, how did you understand the math today? How did you feel about learning math today? And then a student can throw a comment in there if they like. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go back to this dashboard, and I'm going to do a few things behind the scenes that will give us an opportunity to show off what's going on here. So let me do my little business over here. I'm going to look over here and see what kind of preponderant. We have a whole lot of 6 to 12 teachers, a few coaches, some others in here. Okay, I'm going to see here. All right. Let me see here. We got a lot of folks like in movies. Okay, that's good. That's good. That's good. All right. Okay, okay. Then Oh, these are pretty cool. These are some of the shapes folks have made. And I can go over here. I can see the way that they're scaling things, and I can see some of their responses. Okay. On slide 5 here, again, I can see the way that they copied some of these images, and I can see their responses. Shapes are now squiggly. I like that one. Okay. And now I'm just going to jump over here really quick. I'm noticing where students are in this activity. Some of them are jumping around. I can see that this person kind of skipped over 2 slides, but I can see that people are all over the place, which is understandable. I only handed this out about 5 minutes ago, but we have fewer and fewer people at these later slides than the earlier slides, and that's to be expected here. But I'm going to look at some of these answers. I'm really interested in this slide 7, because this is really where students have made some observations, and now they are kind of making some conclusions about the difference between a scaled copy and a not scaled copy. And I'm hitting this little camera icon, and that's saving it in another place that I will show you in a moment. Remember that everything we're doing here is just kind of showing you what is possible. I'm going to leave you with a lot of resources that you can dig into to say, what was that he did there? Or what was that weird snapshot tool that he did? How can I learn more about that? You'll have the opportunity to see where you can find out more about that later. All right. Here are my ones that I captured from slide 7 here. Spelling error, it's the end of the day. All right. So now what I can do is I can present this. Actually, what I can do first is I can hit pause. And some of the teachers at home with last names M are groaning a little bit because on their screens, everything is gray and they are locked in place, because I want them to pay attention to what I'm doing up here. And I want them to see that, hey, we all miss going to the movies, which may or may not be important. But I can show them on this next slide. I can point out some of the different language that teachers have used to describe the difference between a scaled copy and a not scaled copy. And I can point out some of the areas where some of the language is the same, some areas where it's different. A practice that we kind of encourage here is to show how teachers are formalizing, or students rather, are formalizing language. We can order the sequence that we put some of these slides in. I'll unpause you so you can keep going there. But this screen over here under the snapshots tab is where I can grab a lot of those responses that I snipped with that camera icon, and I can drag them into a slide and arrange them, and I can pose a question up here, as long as I spell it right. And I can hit present, and it kind of shows like a slide would project. Okay. Let's go back to my summary screen. That 8th slide was what we call a card sort. And what you see here is a layout of all the different stacks that teachers have arranged these into. Now, a lot of these look quite boring, and that's because I think the teacher may just not have done anything on those yet. But I can see everything from these green piles, which that means that everything's correct. And I can see this pile where that orange deck means that there's at least one card incorrect in there. So I can pull this up and I can show this to the class, and we can say, hey, what advice would you give this student? You know, what question could you ask this student to help them understand what mistake they may have made? The glorious thing about this is, if you see, this person does not have a last name M, but in fact, this person has a pseudonym that is the name of a famous mathematician. If I jump back here to the summary screen, I have this thing called Anonymize turned on. And it's taken all of your names and turned them into the names of notable mathematicians. Some of them you might recognize, many of them you may not. They're all Googleable, and you can find out what they are famous for. But it gives the student kind of a little bit of cover. So I could open up this one and talk critically about this student's work, respectfully, but in a way that doesn't out who they are and what mistake they may have personally made. But they know what their fake name is because it's also on their screen, and they can get that feedback that their classmates are giving them. I can also show the answer key right on here. The other cool thing about these card sorts is that it gives me an overview. and it can show me, for example, which card is most incorrectly used. And that's really a great way that I can kind of drill it down and say, all right, everybody needs to pause. Let's talk about this one card because a lot of you are really showing some confusion with this one card. Okay. I have just demoed a whole bunch of things for you. And let me summarize a few of them. This is generally called the dashboard, where you see everything that a student is doing in a particular activity. I'll show you where those activities live in a moment. You see each row with every student. If there is correctness available for that particular slide, like there are with the card sorts, it's giving a check if everything is good. It's giving an X or a cross if there's at least one mistake. If it's not really correct or incorrect, it's just giving me a dot. Like this was a where teachers were just typing in feedback. And this kind of shows where I am. I can pause everybody by doing that. I can also paste, and this is something I haven't used yet, but let's say I want everyone to get to that card sort right now because we need to talk about an incorrect card. I can hit pasting, and I can hit the card sort screen, and everybody is zooming to that screen right now. There's a few stragglers here. I think that might be because of potentially some Wi-Fi connectivity issues on the student's end. But I can also expand that screen, so now everybody is accessible to the second two screens. I can stop it all together, and I can paste everybody to just this set of screens if I want. So this is a way that I can control where the students are at any given moment. Okay. Something else that's really neat that I'll show you right now that I've been using a lot in distance learning and asynchronous situations is written feedback. So I can find a student, like this student right here, and I can look to see on my end, purely on my end, and I can see, all right, so the student's having an issue here with a few of these, and it looks like some of these are just not put in the right spot. I can open up this little, looks like a chat window, and I can say to, consider the angles in the figure. And I can hit enter, and that goes directly to the student. If I pop out here into the dashboard, I can see that I've given the student feedback. Where is it? There it is. That little teal triangle in the corner means that they have written feedback. Once the student looks at that feedback, then that will go gray. So I know if the student has seen it or not. They cannot respond, but they certainly could make adjustments to that response based on my feedback. So this is a good way that we can give feedback to students, potentially from a distance or asynchronous. Okay. That is a very, very brief intro to how to run activities and how these work. I'm going to show you in a second where you can find them and where you can start them and how all that works. But before that, I'll point out that on this document that we have here, there is a lot of places to follow up. How do I use the icons in the teacher dashboard? How do I hide and unhide a student? More about snapshots, more about that written feedback that we talked about. You can have co-teachers access your dashboard as well. There's some information on how to do that right here. So a lot, again, I'm sure you have a lot of questions, and we'll have some time in a minute or two to take some of those questions. But this is also a place where you can go to follow up to get a whole lot more information on what we're talking about. Okay, so let me pop out here into teacher.desmos.com, and that is accessible from our front page, but this is sort of the main landing page for all of these activities. And basically, what you see right here are a lot of either individual activities or collections of activities. Here's an activity on turtle time trials. This is a fun one. So what we see down here at the bottom is we see screens that will preview what is in this activity. I can open them, and I can proceed through to see what the student experience would be like. If I like this activity and I want to assign it to my students, I can hit assign or start a session, and I would hit single session code here. Now mine might look a little different from yours because I have my Google Classroom connected to this, and I'll talk about that in a second. But if you don't, this button is just simply says create a session. So like I mentioned, we do have integration with Google Classroom and with creating just general classes on your own. If you use Google Classroom, you can make a connection between Desmos and your Google Classroom account, and all of your classes that are active in Google Classroom can be assigned a Desmos activity. It'll automatically migrate it directly over there, and the sort of rosters will stay in sync. If you don't use Google Classroom, you can still set up classes within Desmos so that students don't have to type in a code every time you start a new activity. And that's not something you have to do to run these activities, but it is something that makes running them a little bit easier if you run a good amount of them. So something I'd encourage you to explore here on the main screen is on the left-hand side, we've broken some activities that we offer up by topic and even by grade level potentially. And you can explore those. These are what we call collections, where you can open up here and you'll see a collection of different activities. You can add this collection to your personal collection so that it's a little bit more readily available to you and sort of in your library so you can find it a little bit easier. If you note in our notes, I have put a whole bunch of collections. Some of them you just saw on the screen there, and some of them you might not have. But these are some collections you might be interested in checking out if you want to explore some more activities. All right, that is a whole lot of information in a very short amount of time. We have 10 minutes left. And what I think might be a better way to use those last 10 minutes is to see if you have any questions about kind of getting started with these activities and anything that you want me to answer for you right now, rather than me just choosing something to demo for you next.
Yes, we have a list of questions.
I'm sure we do. Throw them at me. I'm ready.
Great questions. Okay, here we go. First question is there a way that you can create an activity by pulling pre-made questions?
Absolutely. Okay, let me get you started. Let me show you how the beginning of that is. Before I do that, let me show you right here. Building the Desmos. To create your own activity, go to teacher.desmos.com, click on custom, hit new activity, and then start building. Let me show you what that looks like. So here we are. We're on the main page. Custom activities. I have some extra stuff here that you might not see on yours, but custom activities is where you want to go. Here's where you see every custom activity that I've ever made. It also includes a lot of activities that I copied and edited from other folks. But if I hit new activity here, you can type in the title of your new activity. You can put in a description if that makes sense to you. You can make it private so no one else can view it, or you can make it publicly accessible and hit create new activity. What I see now, this is the playground. This is where I can play around with stuff. I can add screens and I can add different components. On my first screen, maybe I add a note here. Oh gosh, of course I can't think of a random question. Let's do something incredibly simple just so I can remember it. What is 1 + 2? And I can even make this math visual like that. I can hit an input for math, and that means that the student is going to be able to input their answer down there. If I want to see what this looks like, I would hit preview. Always use preview to see. And this is what the student would look like at this point on this situation. And this is a place where they can type in their answer. Let's say I want to make that multiple choice instead. I can get rid of this component. And I can hit multiple choice. I can give the student a few different options. And I can even make that keyed so that on the dashboard, it'll show those checks and X's the way that you would expect. I want to add a new slide. I can hit plus and build away. It might also be valuable for you to take an activity that is existing and hit copy edit on that activity. And that would give you potentially a little bit more a place to kind of start and customize for those activities. Hop out of here really quick and show you where that would be. So let's say I really liked that turtle activity, but I wanted to add another slide to it, asking students about something that we did in class. These 3 dots right here give me the activity to share the activity or to copy and edit. If I hit copy and edit, this is a copy that is just for me and no one else. And I can see all these slides that we had here. Let's see if I want to add a new slide asking how your day went. Okay. And I can have students give a text input here. I'll get rid of this component. And I want this to go in the beginning, so I'm going to drag it to the front, kind of like you would on PowerPoint or on Google Slides. It's a very similar type of design. And now that is part of this new activity that I've customized. Okay. I also mentioned, I'm going to discard this draft. I also mentioned about sharing. Let me mention that really quick. Let's say you have an activity that you made and you want to share with a colleague. This URL right here, I can copy and paste and send to anybody. If the other person picks up that URL and opens it, they'll get exactly the same activity that you see in front of you. Any activity you make, even if you make it publicly accessible, is not automatically searchable here on like the main teacher.desmos.com page. We have a pretty more strictly curated list of activities that we know are going to work in a more general sense and are going to work for teachers every time. But that being said, anything you make can be shared out to anyone if you directly send it to them. Either email or text it to them, however you want to send that URL to someone else. Another question out there?
We sure do. We have lots of questions. Can you go back to your teacher dashboard and I will pull out the questions specifically related to that?
Absolutely.
Okay, so the first question is, can you show us again from the teacher dashboard how you can see which answers are incorrect?
Sure. So now keep in mind, not everything has correctness associated with it, right? Like some of these written responses, you know, if they wrote something in that, a dot will show. If they skipped it, nothing will show. But otherwise, on this dashboard side, a check means that what they did is correct, and X means that there's at least one error. Now over here, if they made any adjustments to this original polygon, it gave them a correct response. But over here, the checks and X's reflect whether or not the card sort is arranged in a correct or incorrect manner. And even these students who didn't do anything on these, those are currently showing as incorrect because they were on the screen, but did not leave it in a correct state. Multiple choice questions are other questions that if there's correctness associated with them, they will also show with these checks or X's depending on if they're correct or not.
Just as a quick note, I'm coming up here. I've got 425. We do have a pretty lengthy list of questions here. Dave has agreed to hang on for a few minutes.
Yeah,
So our goal is to work through all the questions that I'm seeing. Again, we are recording. The recording will go till the end. If you, you know, we said through 4:30, we're going to go a little longer because we've had such great questions.
Sure.
If you do need to sign off, you'll receive a copy of this recording tomorrow in your email. All right, Dave, on that dashboard, to get to that dashboard feature, did you have to set up a class ahead of time, or were you able to get there just by giving the kids the code?
Yes, let me go through that. So this, you know, I showed you in that turtle activity, the sort of, there's a landing page for an activity, whether or not you have individual sections made, right? So this is what that looks like for the activity that everyone just did. That's also linked in the notes. So the session that you all just participated in is right there. Let's say I want to do a new session. I'm doing another seminar tomorrow. I'll do another single session code, and there's that new session. This is the code that students would use to get into that session. This is how many are currently logged into it. And if I want to view that dashboard, I just hit View Dashboard right here. Now suddenly I'm in that activity. If you're using the Google Classroom integration, then if I were to go in here and start a new session, or not just Google Classroom, but classes that you can also create within Desmos, even without Google Classroom, I would click on the period that I want to assign it to, and that would also show up like a new row in the activity sessions, but it would only be for those students who are already part of that class, and it would push it out to them on Google Classroom itself. I think that answers that question, right?
And you actually did a couple other questions about the easiest way to assign. Also, we had several questions asking about functionality within Google Classroom. Do you have the ability to assign in Google Classroom early?
Not yet. I think that is something that this integration is about 2 weeks old itself. But I know that one of the things they were talking about is during the assigning process on the Desmos side, making it so that it delays when it rolls out to students. Because I had this problem too, where I hit it, it immediately goes over to Google Classroom. Now, what I'm doing right now to fix that, or to kind of prevent students from getting into something too early, is I am opening up that session and I'm just hitting pause. And what that means is, sure, a student can open it up, but they're not going to be able to do anything because they're going to open it and it's all going to be paused. And then when I want them to start it, when we meet, When we meet virtually, at the moment that I want them to be able to start working on it, I can simply unpause it, and now the students will be able to get in there. But I wouldn't be surprised if that capability to kind of be more precise about scheduling does roll out at some point.
What about the code that you're sharing with students? Do you have the ability to kind of make that code what you would like it to be, or do you kind of have to go with the one that it generates?
You have to go with the one they give you. It's a 6-character code. They avoid things like L's and ones and zeros and O's that might be confusing. They've also, thankfully, filtered out a lot of the, let's say, numbers and phrases that you wouldn't want to show in large screen onto a classroom. So they're generally sort of very neutral strings of characters, but they're not customizable for the teachers, unfortunately.
Okay. Can you show us again how to give written feedback on a question? And then also how, when you are working within one, how you can identify correct versus incorrect?
Sure. So if I want to give written feedback to a student, let's just click on one at random. And let's say I want to give written feedback. There's an icon right at the top of this screen. If I click that, it gives me this little sort of, looks almost like a chat window on the right-hand side. And I can give obviously any kind of feedback I want. Okay, hit enter. And there you go. So if I go to another slide on that same student's screen, it's going to show me any feedback I gave on any previous slide as well. So if I give more feedback, it's going to separate it by screen. And I can say, oh, what was that I gave, here? And it'll take me right back to that screen if that's something I want to do. Okay. Once I pop out, again, you'll see that those two have that little turquoise triangle. If the student went back to view it, it'll turn gray, so I know if they viewed it. Correctness is really only viewable from this summary view of the dashboard through the checks and X's. And keep in mind, not everything has the ability to be judged as correct. But if it does, and if that's been marked with the design of the activity, then it'll show either a check or an X.
Right. What about functionality? We talked about Google Classroom. What about functionality within Canvas?
Yeah, I think we have the ability to embed graphing calculator screens in Canvas, and one second. Look, one thing. I'm about to say something, but I want to make sure that it's accurate. Yeah, as of right now, I'll verify this really quick. Sorry, I want to say something wrong. Yeah, so we can definitely embed graphing calculator screens within Canvas, but I don't know that we can embed activities in Canvas. And I can't find a definite answer on that yet, so I'm going to say I'm not sure right now. I know that we definitely can do it with graphing calculator screens, but I'm not 100% sure of the integration with Canvas and the activities, so I could get back to you on that.
Okay. What about, do all of the kids have to participate in the activities at the same time? This was asked by a teacher who, she's got some blended learning going on, and kids might not all be online at the exact same time.
No, absolutely. No, they can do it any pace that you want. Now, I mean, that and how that works is going to depend on sort of how you want to run that activity, right? And how you want to. And there's some activities that might make perfect sense to assign and say, do this at your pace, at your time when it makes sense to. And there's other activities that might make more sense to do all together. And even if that all together means over a video conference while students are working on the activity in tandem, right? And that's up to the teacher to figure out what makes the most sense. But there's nothing about, I could open an activity and students could be doing it over the course of several days or a week or several weeks. There's no limiting factor about that time constraint at all.
All right, back to talking about kind of creating your own activity. Are you able to search and kind of pick and choose questions from different activities to combine into kind of a new activity that you have created?
Yes. So that's a good question. So let me go. Oh, this was perfect. So this is an activity that I'd started a minute ago. And let's jump into teacher.desmos.com. Actually, a good place where I can demo this is we have some of these starter screens. And these are screens that we actually have made specifically for distance learning. Screens for checking in or screens for checking understanding. And so this is, I can look at the preview here today. This is a great screen. Where are you at today? And the student can grab the points and like say, makes sense or is confusing, is interesting, uninteresting. You could copy a screen from any activity, but let's copy this one. There's a little icon here at the top of the preview screen, and I can copy this screen. Now, if I go back to that place where I was building my activity, I'm just simply going to paste. I can paste up here from edit. I can paste from the keyboard, however you like to do it. And there's that screen now dropped right into my activity. So I can pull a screen from any activity I see anywhere else. And again, we have some of these. This is an activity that is really just screens that teachers might be interested in copying out. Individually, they make more sense than sort of all together. And there's a collection here called starter screens, and that's linked in the notes as well. And copying screens out is definitely something that you can do and is advisable if you're trying to customize activities.
Can we go back to kind of creating that activity, and can you show again how teachers can type equations and have them appear with all the correct math characters?
Sure. So here I made a note, and that's just simply where you would be typing in any sort of text, a question prompt, or whatever kind of text you want to type for students. So I can type anything I want in normal text by default. I can even take something and make it bold or italics. I can create links, all that kind of stuff. But if I want to write an equation, I can go down here and hit this button, and I can type math. So I can type in, using a lot of the same shortcuts that I demoed for the scientific calculator. I can type in any sort of equation or a math sort of formatted equation type that I want.
All right. What about, is there a way to give the kids kind of a blank slide that they can respond on, or that they can respond and then you can see all of them together?
With or without a prompt, or?
I think with the prompt, but then have the kids write underneath it.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. So, okay, and we kind of did that on the first screen a little bit. Let me show it to you right here again. So what I see right now is I have a note module, a note component up here. If I hit preview, it's really just this text, right? Preview is a great tool for seeing where we are, because it's not always as clear when we're looking at the components here, okay? So maybe I put a prompt right here. If I hit text input is like free text. Whereas math input is really just for numbers or other mathematical expressions. It's going to format it as an equation. So I'm just going to type in text input, and this is where the text box would show. If I want other students to see what students in the class are writing, when they hit enter, it would show just 3 random responses. If I don't want them to see what other students are writing, I could just uncheck that box. And I'll hit preview here, and now this is what this will look like. So what do you think? And now there's a text box where students can type in anything they want. They can even use some mathematical formatting if they like. And there you go.
All right, next, if we could switch on your screen, Dave, to go back to just the scientific calculator. We had a few questions about the cubed roots. Will this only work for numerical expressions, or can you also put in polynomials?
For the scientific calculator?
Correct.
Well, I mean, I could type in something like cube root of x, but there's not much that we can do with that. Now, if I say somewhere else, let x equal 8, it'll go back and redefine that. So To be honest, I mean, unless you're evaluating polynomials, which again, that functionality changes if they're on the North Carolina test. But polynomials, I mean, if you're interested in graphing polynomials, you might want to come back for the graphing calculator session next week, where that might make a little more sense to do it in there. Otherwise, if you want to evaluate one, you could put anything under that cube root, and it'll treat it mathematically.
All right. Can you show us again how to, for the presentation mode, how to make the buttons appear larger on your screen? I think back with the calculator where you just were.
Oh, yeah. Got it. That's right here. Great. So that's all in the wrench. Any display changes you want to make would be in wrench, and that's called projector mode.
All right. Can you show us again, like, for example, maybe could you show us a mixed number divided by a mixed number?
Sure. So if I were doing this, I would actually start with the division. And that's going to make it a little bit easier to be able to type these things in. Let me type one in with the space bar and the other one without it. So maybe I could say 7 1/5 divided by, let's say, 2 3/8. So I'm going to type in that 3/8 first, and then go back and type in my 2. And then I can put that back. Oh my gosh, that's a terrible fraction. But so that works that way. So now if the student didn't do that first, this is what it's going to look like. So if the student typed the mixed number first and then tried to divide, unfortunately, it's going to look like this. And that's why now if we highlight the whole thing and then hit divided, it's going to work a little bit better. But if you're going to have students dividing fractions by fractions or mixed numbers by mixed numbers, I would strongly encourage them to just throw that, to start with the division and then fill in the numerator and denominator.
And can we try that North Carolina version and see if it'll let us do it there?
Sure. So let's see here, 5 7/9. And then I'm gonna have that trick where I highlight everything. And then let's see, 6/7, 2 6/7. Okay, and there we go. And again, we are gonna follow up on the fraction conversion.
All right, and I will definitely follow up with programmers on that. We also had a question on your handout, the bit.ly site that you had shared, that you had kind of curated. Are there instructions on there about how to embed the calculator?
Well, keep in mind that the scientific calculator itself cannot be embedded. When I mentioned about embedding, you can only embed the graphing calculator into Canvas.
All right, I think we have hit them all. If I missed your question, I apologize in advance. Before we leave today, we are going to make sure you have Dave's information and my information, and you are welcome to hit us up. I would be your best person if it's a North Carolina question or if it's something about testing, and if it is specific to the calculator that Dave showed us today, or how to create and how to build, how to assign things. Dave's going to be your best resource for that.
Yep. And you can email me directly at that email address. You can reach me on Twitter. The Desmos community on Twitter is also really active. So even if you tweet directly at Desmos, they will respond to your question pretty quick. And if you could, there's a bit.ly link up there for a survey. We would really appreciate any feedback you have for us about this session, about the calculator in general. We would love to hear from you.
And I'm gonna wrap up by just stating again, we have recorded today's session. Anyone who has registered, whether they logged in or not, tomorrow you will receive a link to today's recording. I'll also make sure that I include that bit.ly link that Dave shared that has all of our everything he's curated, that great Google file with the many tips and tricks. For those of you who are teaching 8th grade, or for those of you who would like to learn a little bit more about the graphing calculator features, we do have another one of these scheduled for next Wednesday at 3:30. I'm going to drop in the chat, I'm going to drop the link for registering. There's not a ton of space left. So if you are interested, I encourage you to sign up quickly. If for some reason it won't let you in, send me an email and I'll at least make sure that we take care of getting you the recording of that session so that you can watch. We've recorded all of these. I also, I had a couple notes from folks who I think kind of span grade levels. Maybe they're in a support role in the county. If you are interested in the recording for last week's session, and last week's session was on the 4-function calculator, which is what we use in North Carolina for grades 3, 4, and 5. That recording is available now, and I also have Dave's bit.ly link with the resources he curated for elementary schools. If you will send me a quick email, I'll be happy to share that information with you. I am going to drop my email in the chat. You are welcome to hit me up with North Carolina questions or testing questions. Dave's email is on your screen. We appreciate so much you giving us an hour and 15 minutes of your time on a Wednesday afternoon. Dave, is there anything you'd like to add before we sign off for today?
Just, I mean, good luck to everybody this school year. And I hope you wish the same for me. We're all doing the best we can. And for that matter, I hope tools like this might make your teaching lives a little bit easier. So good luck to everybody.
Absolutely. And I am going to, we've had a couple of requests for your survey. I'm going to drop your survey link in the chat as well. I echo his comments. Your efforts and your love and your time are so much appreciated for the students of North Carolina, and please let us know how we can support you. Bye, guys.
Thanks, everybody.